Welcome to the Smart Resources Podcast, your go-to space for insightful, curriculum-aligned content designed to make CBSE learning meaningful, engaging, and real-world ready. In today's episode, we're exploring Chapter 5, Indigo from the Class 12 English Core Curriculum.
Imagine this. Just one single peasant. Seems pretty insignificant, right? But he sparks a movement that, well, it changes the whole course of a nation. That's the story we're diving into today, Champaran. It's a really pivotal moment in India's independence struggle, and it's all laid out in Chapter 5, Indigo. So our mission here is to kind of unpack what was happening back then, 1917, look at the key people like Mahatma Gandhi, obviously, and this remarkable figure, Rajkumar Shukla. And you'll see how Gandhi's leadership style, based on truth, negotiation, nonviolence, really comes alive. We'll touch on themes like justice, courage, and people working together.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how this seemingly local problem about growing indigo, it becomes this foundational lesson, a lesson in civil disobedience and self-reliance, not just for the peasants there, but actually for Gandhi himself and, ultimately for the whole independence movement.
Okay, so it all kicks off with this sort of unlikely beginning, as the text calls it. A peasant comes up to Gandhi. What was it about this first meeting with Rajkumar Shukla? It sounds kind of unremarkable at first glance, but looking back, why was it so crucial?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because, on the surface, it's December 1916, the big Indian National Congress meeting in Lucknow. Loads of delegates, over 2,000. And this sharecropper, Rajkumar Shukla, approaches Gandhi. He's described as poor and emaciated, illiterate but resolute. Comes from Champaran, a place Gandhi hadn't even heard of, up near the Himalayas. And he's there just to complain, basically, about the injustice of the landlord system. So, maybe just another plea in a crowd.
One among many. But something made Shukla stand out, didn't it? What got Gandhi's attention?
It was his persistence, his sheer tenacity, really. Gandhi's schedule was packed, incredibly busy. But Shukla, he just wouldn't let it go. The text says he followed Gandhi everywhere for weeks. Then it turned into months, just begging him fix a date to come to Champaran. And Gandhi, well, he was clearly impressed by this determination, by the story too. He finally agrees, okay, meet me in Calcutta. I'll go with you from there. It was that relentless belief, that resolve. That's what convinced Gandhi something important was happening here.
Right. So it wasn't just the injustice itself, but seeing it embodied in Shukla's determination to get help. Okay, let's shift to the core issue then, the indigo problem. How did this old farming setup become such a flashpoint?
Well, it was a system that had been around for a long time, most of the decent farmland in Champaran, divided into these huge estates owned by Englishmen, worked by Indian tenants. And under this ancient arrangement, as it's called, the peasants had to plant indigo on, specifically 3/20ths or 15% of their land. And then they had to surrender the entire indigo harvest as rent. So essentially forced labor for the land.
Cultivation.
And then things changed, right? Something happened that kind of flipped the script on this old system.
Exactly. The landlords got wind that Germany had developed synthetic indigo.
Uh-oh.
Game changer. They saw their chance, really, to get out of this indigo business, which was becoming less profitable. So they got agreements from the sharecroppers, agreements to pay the landlords compensation. Basically, paid to be released from that 15% indigo requirement.
Right.
Now, a lot of peasants, well, they didn't know the full story, so they signed willingly.
But I bet once word got out about the synthetic indigo, and they realized they'd paid to get out of something the landlords didn't even really want anymore. They wanted their money back. Precisely. They felt cheated, really, taken advantage of. And that created the anger, the frustration that Shukla had traveled so far to tell Gandhi about.
So Gandhi gets to Champaran. What's his first move? How does he handle this situation where the British establishment clearly sees him as an outsider meddling?
He doesn't just wade in shouting. His first step is classic Gandhi. Find the facts. A fact-finding mission. He goes to the secretary of the British Landlords Association. But the secretary flat out refuses, tells him he won't give information to an outsider. Gandhi's response is quite bold, just calmly states he's no outsider, not in his own country. Then he tries the British official commissioner for the area, Tirhut Division. This guy apparently proceeded to bully him, told him to forthwith leave Tirhut. But crucially, Gandhi didn't leave.
Wow. That's a statement right there. Rejecting the outsider label, refusing to leave. What did that tell you about his strategy from the get-go?
It showed his commitment, didn't it? To justice, yes, but also to his method, nonviolent resistance. Like later in Motihari, he's investigating a peasant who'd been mistreated. He gets served an official notice to quit Champaran immediately. He signs the receipt, acknowledging he got it, but then writes right on it that he would disobey the order. That's civil disobedience in action, openly defying an unjust order, ready for the consequences.
And the reaction to that defiance, it was huge, wasn't it? The next morning, Motihari is just black with peasants. That image is powerful. What do you think those British officials were thinking? Seeing this spontaneous, huge gathering. They were used to being in charge, having people scared.
Oh, it must have been completely bewildering for them. Their whole power structure rested on fear, on obedience, and suddenly thousands of people are demonstrating spontaneously, the text emphasizes, around the courthouse. The book calls it the beginning of their liberation from fear of the British and the officials. They felt powerless without Gandhi's cooperation. Imagine that. It wasn't just a mob. It was this peaceful but incredibly strong display. The power dynamic just shifted right there. They lost the narrative.
So in court, Gandhi doesn't try to argue technicalities. He pleads guilty. But he talks about a conflict of duties. What's the deeper point he's making there?
He's laying out the core principle of civil disobedience, really. He wasn't breaking the law just 'cause. He said he had to choose between respecting the law and serving a higher purpose, humanitarian and national service, listening to the higher law of our being, the voice of conscience. So disobeying the order wasn't out of disrespect for authority, but obedience to conscience. And then he refused bail. Amazingly, the judge actually released him without it. His moral stand was just that powerful.
And the effect on the Indian lawyers there, people like Rajendra Prasad, who became India's first president later. That's quite a story, too. Gandhi asked them, "What will you do if I go to jail?" Their first instinct is, we'll go home, but then they rethink it. Was that the moment Gandhi felt the battle was won?
It absolutely was. That was the turning point for the local leadership. These were prominent, educated men. They suddenly realized, wait a minute, if this stranger, Gandhi, is ready to go to prison for these peasants, how can we, who claim to serve them, just walk away? That would be shameful desertion. So when they told Gandhi, no, we'll follow you to jail, that showed real unity, a willingness to sacrifice. That commitment, that's when Gandhi exclaimed, the Battle of Champaran is won. And sure enough, just days later, the lieutenant governor ordered the case against Gandhi dropped. Civil disobedience had worked. The first time in modern India, the text says. Their united front made the difference.
Okay, so the immediate legal threat is gone. What happens next for the peasants and the landlords? I read they did this huge inquiry, right? 10,000 depositions.
Yeah, a massive effort. Gandhi and the lawyers basically compiled a mountain of evidence, took statements from about 10,000 peasants detailing the exploitation. Faced with this crushing mountain of evidence, the planters, the landlords, they had to give in. They agreed to make refunds. Gandhi initially asked for 50% back. The planters offered only 25%. And Gandhi, he accepted it.
Accepting 25%. That's interesting strategically. I mean, you could argue after all that exploitation, 25% feels a bit low for the peasants, couldn't you? Is there pushback on that decision?
That's a really fair point to raise. And purely financially, yeah, 25% might seem small compensation. But Gandhi saw the bigger picture. He explained later that the actual amount of money was less important than the fact that the landlords had been obliged to surrender part of the money, and with it, part of their prestige. This wasn't just about cash. It was about breaking the landlord's power, their aura of invincibility. It taught the peasants they had rights and defenders. Crucially, it says, they learned courage. So the debate wasn't really about the percentage, but the principle, empowering the peasants, and the result. Within a few years, the British planters just left. They abandoned their estates. Indigo sharecropping disappeared. So that 25% clearly unlocked something much bigger.
Wow. Okay, so the symbolic victory led to real systemic change. That makes sense. But Gandhi didn't just pack up and leave then, did he? He saw other issues.
No, not at all. He looked around and saw the cultural and social backwardness in the villages. He wasn't just focused on the political or economic fix. He started appealing for volunteers. Teachers came. They opened primary schools in 6 villages. His wife, Kasturbai, taught basic hygiene and sanitation. A doctor volunteered for 6 months. Gandhi was looking at the whole picture, the community's well-being.
Right, holistic development. And it's in that context, dealing with these broader issues, that the lesson about self-reliance really comes through, isn't it? With Charles Freer Andrews, the English pacifist, offering to help, and Gandhi saying no.
Exactly. A very telling moment. Andrews was a friend, an ally, an Englishman sympathetic to their cause. He offered to stay and help the movement. But Gandhi vehemently opposed it. He told the Indian lawyers, essentially, relying on an Englishman, even a friendly one, showed the weakness of your heart. His point was, you must rely upon yourselves to win the battle. It was a crucial lesson. If India was to be free, Indians had to learn to stand on their own feet, solve their own problems. That idea of self-reliance or Swaraj in a broader sense became absolutely central to the independence movement, and Champaran was a key learning ground for it.
So looking back, Champaran was this major turning point in Gandhi's life, not just because they won the Indigo fight, but because it shaped his whole approach.
Precisely. It showed him, and everyone else, that his politics weren't just abstract ideals. They were deeply intertwined with the practical, day-to-day problems of the millions. It was about loyalty to living human beings. Not just defying the British, but actually easing suffering, building capacity, molding, as the text says, a new, free Indian who could stand on his own feet. It was where he tested his methods, refined them, and really connected his high principles to the ground reality of ordinary people's lives. It shifted his focus profoundly towards direct, compassionate action.
So it's almost like demonstrating a better way, a human-centered approach, even before political independence was achieved. Okay, so thinking about this whole Champaran episode, it really shows you the power of one person's courage, doesn't it? Even against huge odds, and how collective action, when it's guided by principled leadership, can achieve so much.
Yeah.
What really stands out to you as you reflect on this, about that idea of freedom from fear being necessary before you can even start talking about justice, and how might that idea still be relevant today?
If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to Smart Resources, share the episode with your classmates, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning,